Hi, my name is Roy Collin and welcome to the show. I've also got 5 podcasts, the Awakening podcast, exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions, the Crypto podcast, talking about all things blockchain, NFTs, crypto, the Meditation podcast, talking about all different types of meditation, but there's also meditations there from 1 minute to 2 hours. And the other one's the Learn Polish podcast, so if you're interested in learning Polish, you can do that. And the other one is Speaking with Roy Collin, and I just have guests from around the world talking about either public speaking or also about their book or just general life in general. And you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. I'm also a podcasting coach, and you see the QR code there, and it's also on my link as well. And if you're interested in actually going on some podcast shows, I'm helping people doing that. Or if you're interested in sponsorship, you can contact me. And I'd like to thank my sponsor, DanielPacker.com. He helps people with anxiety, stress, and addictions. He's got a 90% success rate, and you only pay if you're successful. So be sure to check him out, DanielPacker.com. I hope you enjoy this week's show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Grace Asagra of Quantum Nurse Podcast, and we collectively, Roy and I and a few others collectively created the collaboration from friends amongst the different countries so that we could bring you perspective from different backgrounds. And so that's what we've been trying to do and bring you experts who took courageous step to get out of their comfort, and others have been doing this way before 2020, and others are just starting to really connect the dots from all our past history. And so I'm really very excited and honored to have Dr. Uwe Alschner, and he is also been working with he's been working with Vera Sharav, whom some of you know that we've had her also in the past. But first, let me thank our audience again, our supporters. When you support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing the information that we have through this podcast or through the information of the guests that we bring to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because in connecting with each other, we can make a change of where the history is taking us back again, which we don't want to happen. So Dr. Uwe Alschner, from what I understand a little bit about him, is an excellent historian. He is also an independent journalist, and he had that top level positions in business and politics, and because he is an expert in strategic communication and consulting for decision makers. Too bad they didn't consult him on what to do with the so-called pandemic, or else we would have not been in this position now. However, he stepped out to really speak out, and when I get to hear him at Matt Ehret's Connecting the Dots, I was truly excited because for me, someone with his credibility is the right person for us to have this conversation. That for those who are awake and for those who are still woke and living under the rock, please, it's time to really know what you need to know. And let's see, he's just like most of you fathers. He's a father and he has children, and so he cares much about our family, our families, and the community, and the whole world. So, and as Matthew would always say, many people and many podcasters, whether it's in the alternative media, we tend to generalize things and simplify things, but sometimes it's important to dig deeper and see what we could learn from the past and not what learning now, and then what we can do in the future, because never again would anything else. And that expression for me is true even in our personal health life. Sometimes we say, okay, health, some things come back again. If we don't learn a lesson, we feel the same health problem. So thank you, Dr. Uwe Alschner, for being with us, and please feel free to guide our conversation.
Thank you very much, dear Grace, for the kind introduction. I'm very excited to be on your show.
And so there are a few things that came right away in my mind when I was thinking and not even after you finish the conversation with Matt, I know right away in my heart and in my energy field, I have to invite you. So for the things that came into my mind is, so many people think that we lost the war. Oh, we lost the battle. I mean, Germany lost the battle. And of course, the expression is, but they didn't really lose the war. So, and many of us think that when we think about Nazism, and I remember again one article that Matt Eric wrote is that the Nazi healthcare system is being revived, and is being revived, has been being revived since 2020. So most people would only think that when they think about Nazism, it's only in one country. But more and more, the same thing as when they think about communism. So I think there's a discussion that you could help us of what is really Nazism like that, and why is it that you and Vera made this document. And also, I know you are busy working on making a book on Never Again is Now Global. So please help us understand, especially those who did not get a chance to see that. But there's that documentary film. So if you guys want to do it, just check out the movie Never Again is Now Global.com, and you'll be so informed and you'll get a different perspective, and now you could understand why that movie was made. So I'll pass it on to Uwe. Thank you.
Right. So thank you. Yes, Grace. First of all, let me make it clear to everyone that it is Vera Sharav's documentary, and it is Vera Sharav who is doing the book. And I have had the honor to be asked by Vera to assist her in this work. And the way this came about was that as you said, I've been a middle of the road kind of guy. Yes, I had been working for senior politicians and also very successful business people in Germany. I'd been consulting for them. And I would never have thought that we would end up in a situation such as this, where our governments are doing stuff which is not to the benefit of the people. So I'd always be trustful of what my government was doing. And being a German, being historian by training, I also believed in what I was taught about history and politics post-World War II. So, of course, it is clear to everyone that the Nazis were very evil. What they committed in the German name was atrocious, and it was unspeakable horror which came across the world. So if in this situation I am being asked by a Holocaust survivor to first of all beware, and this was what Vera said when I tried to interview her in April of 2021 about the situation in Israel following the start of the injections campaign there. Vera said something which was shocking to me, and that was, this could be the beginning of the Fourth Reich. And, you know, I'd always been taught that this history is unique, that you must not relativize the Holocaust, and therefore, of course, it was a moment where I thought to myself, wow, this may be a bit too far, right? So I really was kind of in a position where I felt I needed to protect this this very dear lady who was talking to me, and maybe, you know, keep her out of harm's way by making comparisons which at that moment I thought were maybe a bit too far. But on the other hand, immediately it came to my mind that someone such as Vera, with her personal history, she had been a child survivor of the Holocaust. She had lost her father in a camp, and she had survived then and gotten out of the Nazi stronghold. She was a Romanian who had been interned in what is today Ukraine, and due to the walks of the time, she had been put on a track where orphans. She wasn't an orphan then; she only was half orphan, but her mother had said to the authorities that this was not her child and that they should take Vera to get her out and get her into Palestine, which was where this track was headed. Vera, of course, was traumatized by being separated from what she knew was her mother. She had, of course, no understanding of what her mother was trying to do. She just felt the pain of being separated from now her last living relative, and therefore she was very much in pain. She resisted to going along with the authorities who wanted to put her on a ship crossing the Black Sea and on the way to Palestine. She did not go onto that ship, which saved her life, right? This ship was torpedoed in the night, and everyone on the ship was killed. And Vera, because she threw a temper tantrum on shore, was spared. And this, she said, had a very strong impression on her, that she learned that it is necessary to speak up and resist even to authority who want to act on your behalf. They're very often they are not, and so we have to resume our own responsibility. So this is something which she explained to me, and I of course I understood that when she makes this comparison and when she expresses this warning, that she clearly must have been thinking about it very, very thoroughly, right? So therefore I immediately suppressed my urge to be smarter than she was, and try to protect her. Instead, I figured that I had to really get down and do more research to understand what she means, and what I learned from this research was really shocking, because it unveiled that the history we have been taught since the war ended is a complete fabrication. It takes away much of what has been even instrumental in bringing about the Nazi terror on the world, with the aid of oligarchies in London, in New York, and this eugenicist mindset, which was not proprietary German. It had been present at many, many places. So this is something which I learned since. So therefore, I have great respect, and I will do everything I can to have Holocaust survivors such as Vera Sharav speak their mind and do what they're being called to do, even by the letters and the spirit of documents such as the President's Commission report from 1997, right? Hardly anyone knows that in 1979. I'm sorry. It's speaking English. It's not my mother tongue, so therefore I'm trying. Sometimes I'm speaking in the German way. So 1979 is what I'm talking about. Then President Jimmy Carter, he inaugurated. He called upon a commission to make recommendations on an appropriate Holocaust remembrance. And this commission was consisting of many Holocaust survivors and other dignitaries from all over the world, but many of them were Jewish and had survived the Holocaust, such as Elie Wiesel, who later was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and he became a voice for these survivors. And Wiesel, he chaired this commission, and this commission, after almost a year, presented its report to President Carter and to the world public, in which they stated that it is survivors, most of more than others, who have the duty to speak their mind and warn about a possible recurrence of another Holocaust, or even only of parts thereof. This is the exact wording in this report. So this document also was something which I'd been completely oblivious of, and it was only by my work with Vera Sharav that I came across this essential documents, which gives, of course, people like Vera Sharav the right to say whatever she feels is necessary to prevent another Holocaust from recurring again. It doesn't matter whether it is actually how she or others see it. It's just that the world public has an obligation to take this seriously, because those who have survived, they are entrusted by the dead. It is also another expression from this report. They are entrusted by the dead to bear this this memory and to keep those secrets of the horror alive, and also to prevent it by speaking out whenever they see any inclination of danger. And that's what Vera does, and that's why I think she has the right to say anything she sees fit, because she would, of course, have no reason for denigrating or trivializing the memory which was the reason for why she lost her parents and why she seen so much other horror. Instead, she knows how it all started, namely by one is a collaboration with science and medicine on behalf of totalitarian regime and concepts such as eugenics, such as the concept of Übermenschen, and others who are of supposedly lesser value. I mean, we have heard almost the same wording now by people like Yuval Noah Harari and others who speak this as though it was truth. It's not. It is a denial of human dignity. It is making it's a disgrace to the memory of those who have been who died by totalitarian regimes, right? So therefore, even though it may not be the case that it is as of now already like it was in 1944 or 1945, that's not the question. We have learned in German, it is the saying that beware of the beginnings, okay? So never again is what it is written on the memorials, but in German we have a saying which is slightly different, and it says beware of the beginnings. Don't shut your content. Don't shut up when you see injustice being done to whoever, because it started with taking away those very basic rights. I mean, there was in 2020, in January 27th, so before the COVID hysteria started, there was the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, a concentration camp. And they had a ceremony at Auschwitz. And on this occasion, Marian Turski spoke, right? Marian Turski is himself a survivor of Auschwitz. He even survived the death march from Auschwitz to another camp, which was done in bitter cold conditions, and many hundreds of people on this march did not survive. He did survive, and so he was then asked to speak in memory of this tragedy. And he also said, he spoke of the 11th commandment, right? He said, thou shalt not be indifferent. Thou shalt not keep silent when people have their rights being taken away. And he also said, he recalled a conversation which he had when he visited the US South in the 1960s during the civil rights movement, where he was in Montgomery, where this march was from Birmingham to Montgomery with Martin Luther King and other icons of the civil rights movement. And Tursky was there, and he was asked by those on the march whether he thought that something similar like the Holocaust could ever happen again. And he said, yes, sure, it can happen again. It happens when you keep silent in the face of injustice, in the face of human rights violations of any kind. And this is what is meant by beware of the beginning. So therefore, it doesn't have to be the ultimate horror already in our face. It may be. I think we need to really take serious those warnings, such as Vera's and others. It may be, we have to investigate. But even if it is not, we have an obligation to be aware of the beginnings. And this is what I understood when Vera asked me to and invited me to help her in her work, right? So this is why I will not stop. This is why I started my Substack. So the Substack is Never Again Is Now, and it is on Substack, where I write about my work with Vera, where I do also make certain analogies of present events and also of past events, right? So this is something which I will not stop, because I see the urgency that everyone wake up, that some things are very, very similar to how it was back then, which I haven't seen on my own eyes. But that doesn't mean that I must be asleep and trust the authorities. No, you cannot trust the authorities. We have an obligation to be vigilant, each and every one of us.
Thank you, Uwe. There's a lot that you share that each of us should contemplate and do our own research. But let me just, in lieu of time that we're thinking and have agreed upon, maybe I could just share you this image and you tell me what you can share about this image.
Yeah, so this is something which pertains to something which happened a few weeks ago. And it is an image which was taken from, as you can see, the second Corona Symposium in the German Bundestag, which was staged by the opposition party, Alliance for Germany, AfD, and they had a 2-day symposium in the German Bundestag. And it says, on this picture, it says Freiheit statt Impfabo, so it is freedom instead of a flat rate on vaccinations, basically. So this is an image which was used by this parliamentary group to advertise their symposium. In the symposium, over 2 days, they had many experts, all big names in German-speaking countries who are dissidents for the so-called pandemic measures had been present, had been invited. Also those from abroad, such as Dr. Michael Yeadon, okay? And the reason why I put it on my Substack is that something very, very troubling happened at this event, which was dedicated to make, revelations and to educate the public about what was happening. Instead, they censored Dr. Yeadon's talk at this very symposium, which is something I think you must not do. No matter what Dr. Yeadon may have said, I mean, we know by now a recorded version of the translation interpretation has been leaked, so we have a rough idea of what he may have said. We also know what he usually says at other instances, but the recording of his own words until this day, which is now 2 months and a bit past this event, it has still not been handed over even to him. And the reasons this parliamentary group said were, it's completely nonsense. They said they were afraid of being censored by YouTube. Well, as though this would have been the first time that we would have to find other places than YouTube to communicate the truth. But to not publicize this talk is something which is a no-go by all means, because Dr. Yeadon was invited to speak. He spoke on the issue of health and freedom on a global issue, and he spoke about other reasons which may have been behind what was staged during the so-called COVID pandemic, right? And these, of course, are not related to just the narrow sense health and physical well-being, because they are also linked to stuff like CBDCs and digital identity and means to control and take away individual liberties and human rights on a different matter. And this is what Michael Yeadon is concerned about. Whether or not he's right, I have no idea. Something of what he says seems very, very sensible. And so therefore, I think we should take a good look at, and check out what is behind it. But in any case, he has the right to say this, and he has been invited to say it because it was known what he would say. So therefore, to censor it is a no-go. And in my piece, I write about exactly this no-go, where some group which calls itself an opposition has been doing the same kind of censorship which we have been standing up against for the past 5 years.
Thank you. And this?
Yeah, so this is another piece which I wrote. What you can see is an image from the Pandemic Prevention Platform, P3, of the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency, I think it is, or Advanced Research Agency, DARPA. I don't know exactly which one of the two, but it's one of those agencies which are under the umbrella of the Pentagon, of the U.S. Defense Forces, and they have been working on pandemic prevention for a long time, even before COVID, which is something which I think we should look into. And the point behind this is, so they're advocating and have been advocated 60 days to stop the pandemic by ways of genetic immunization techniques, right? So here is the point which I'm making in this piece, and I'm drawing on research from people such as Dr. Jonathan J. Kory from GigaOM Biological, or people like Mark Kulak of Fusatonics Live, who have been doing intensive research about the whole issue. And they are they are saying, Dr. Kory, who's a biologist, who's saying there is no rationale for any novel pathogen being around spreading since 2020. Instead, it is very likely that it has been fabricated just to have this kind of impression of spread, but it is basically mainly MASH casualty events which have been staged, he says, in order to make it appear as though there was a novel pathogen, when in fact they have been rehearsing this situation of a novel pathogen circulating in order to take away freedoms and to introduce those kind of containment measures. And in this case, I can go back to my earlier remarks about Dr. Yeadon. So Dr. Yeadon has not only been censored in the German parliament, but he's also been censored in the British parliament, in the Houses of Westminster and in the House of Commons, at an event which was held on invitation by Andrew Britkin, the British MP, who is speaking out against the shots, and he deserves credit for this. However, on this event, there were other leading people in the movement, in the so-called health movement, who have continued to say that there is an unmet need for mitigation methods, because another pandemic might still come and it might be bigger and worse than this one. So we just have been lucky. Dr. Robert Malone is one of those people who says this. And of course, this is very serious, because if you follow this logic, then indeed there may be reason for why governments should be able to limit our freedoms. Okay? And this is something which we need to really get down and check out very thoroughly, because we even engage in such a thought about possible need for containment and mitigation methods. Dr. Yeadon was censored at the same event where Dr. Malone re-emphasized this unmet need. And so therefore, this is another indication of something going on where we need to have the courage and the power to speak our minds about what we see going on. And we, in this case, being Dr. Yeadon and Dr. Kory and others who say, look, there is no evidence of spread. I mean, Danny Rancourt from Canada has also made a lot of data available showing that there is no evidence for any kind of epidemic spread. And therefore, this would take away all justification for any containment measure which was taken since 2020. And this is the issue we should talk about. Even though the DNA impurities in the shots are, of course, very, very unfortunate and very painful and even deadly for people who took the shots, but it's not our basic problem, right? We are in a situation where they are continuing to introduce other methods, and Dr. Malone is someone who is holding intellectual property patents on some of those other forms of immunization with genetic substances, just not by way of an mRNA shot, right? But for example, by electroporation or some other kind of methods. And this is very serious, because someone like him, who is advocating for an unmet need of containment measures, if he should be our leader next time, saying, oh yeah, no, this time it is very, very serious, we have to take it, many people may even think that he's speaking the truth, when in fact he may not be. And this is the question we need to debate.
Yeah. Hi, Uwe. Like you're mentioning about like the censorship. Prior to recording, I told you that my Awakening podcast, the YouTube channel, was kicked off. But I put on my personal channel Vera, who we had as a wonderful guest on her show, and that got a strike. And I'm just wondering, with what you're doing, all the exposing, and you're obviously very close with Vera, like what kind of censorship are you experiencing?
Well, I've also had many of my initial videos taken down from YouTube. I'm not publishing on YouTube anymore. I also went for other platforms, and I have been until I met Vera, I had been doing a lot of interviews with a lot of people. So I had Dr. McCullough, I had Dr. Kory, I had Lawrie, I had even Dr. Michael Levitt in 2020, so the Nobel laureate who also spoke about no exponential spread and stuff. I had Wittkowski, and my unique selling proposition until then was to translate those kind of English language experts into German. So that's how I started, and that's why I reached out to Vera to talk about the Israeli vaccination campaign. And since then, I have had to really concentrate on the work which was most important. And for me, this has been to help Vera to get out the word, right? So therefore, I have not been doing controversial medical stuff any longer. So therefore, there had been no censorship on that. We have been doing a lot about Vera's talk, and yes, we also face some forms of censorship, you could say, even inside the alternative media orbit, because people have just not been prepared to report about the movie, right? The Never Again Is Now Global movie, for example. German media, almost none of them picked it up, not even the alternative media, because they said, you must not touch this, you must not make a comparison about this. I'm saying it was not me who did it, it is a Holocaust survivor. So do you say that we need to censor them in expressing their concerns of a possible repeat? I don't think so. But that's what they did. So therefore, there were those kinds of censorship. And then we had in August of 2022, the 75th anniversary of the declaration of the Nuremberg Code, right? So after the Second World War, some of the perpetrators, not all of them, and maybe not the most important ones, were put on trial in Nuremberg. And it was a long streak of tribunals. The first was the International Military Tribunal, where the very prominent names, or some of the prominent names, were tried. But what followed then were 12 other subsequent trials, and the first of those 12 following trials was the so-called Doctor's Trial, which went on from 1946 to 1947. So from October 1946 to August 1947. That's why on August 20th of 1947, in the final session where the verdict was being spoken about, those on trial, the Nuremberg Code was declared, stating the individual right of every person to object to any form of experimentation. And for this reason, 75 years later, in August 2022, people, so the group Doctors for Enlightenment and Doctors Rise in Germany, Ärzte stehen auf und Ärzte für Aufklärung, they and others, they put together this event in Nuremberg, where they had a huge stage, and it was attended by thousands of people, where people such as Vera, and Vera was one of the prime guests who spoke at first, addressed the world population. It was streamed live into the whole world about the relevance of this Nuremberg Code to what is going on today, according to what people who have to say something about it, such as Vera, think. Right? Again, it's not the question of whether she says what she says is true 100% or 90% or whatever. We don't have to debate this. We have to make it possible for them to express their concerns. This was also kind of censored by the mainstream media, and it was used by the authorities in Germany to even start investigations against Vera herself. Okay, so what happened was, earlier the same year, in January 2022, in Brussels, a huge rally was abandoned, was called off before it even began. And Vera was there and was about to address 500,000 people in the center of Brussels. She had spoken in Brussels on the very morning before this rally was due to take place in a press conference, and she had expressed her views in this press conference already. So therefore, the authorities knew what she was going to tell, at least generally. So therefore, our conclusion was that they had no interest of Vera addressing such a huge crowd about this serious concerns of hers. So they created a pretext to call off the stuff. They infiltrated the demos, so they let Antifa provocateurs into the demonstration, and they caused havoc and threw smoke bombs and stuff like that. So therefore, the police used this pretext to call off the whole rally. This we did not want to risk a second time in August. So therefore, we told no one that Vera was going to come. It was a secret to almost anybody. And when she went on stage, no one knew that she was there. And then she spoke for 30 minutes, and it was a very powerful speech, which you can also see on Vera's page, ahrp.org, or on neveraganisnowglobal.com. So therefore, I encourage everyone to revisit this speech, read it or see it. It's up in many recordings. After this speech, Vera was reported to the police for alleged Holocaust relativization, right? A Holocaust survivor was reported to police, and the police did not just say, oh, we don't think this has any merit. They investigated her, and they still are investigating her. So they have not concluded their remarks and say this is just someone warning about a possible repeat on the grounds of very serious evidence. They have still written out Vera for questioning. So whenever Vera should come back to Germany, she must fear that she is being detained by police for questioning about her alleged Holocaust trivialization. This in itself is a scandalous incident, and this may be thought of as sort of censorship of sorts. It is definitely a instrumentalization of the law against those who speak truth to power, which Vera is clearly doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a fear factor they put into people to keep them quiet and don't jump out and, stand from the crowd. Wait, you mentioned Dr. Malone. I remember seeing him on one interview when he admitted he got double jabbed himself, and it was I kind of realized straight away, this doesn't seem right. But if you look at the media that he's been on then, like Joe Rogan, and you connect with a lot of the stuff, you look at the demonic stuff. I have pictures of him with demonic pictures and with satanists, and then you have Elon Musk, the exact same. And all these different massive podcasters are, because that's kind of the new media, are just sharing these guests around, but you don't get the guests like Vera going on it. And unfortunately, a load of people are kind of falling for this kind of propaganda, and they're even dropping little bombs, like, as Rogan be talking about, saying Michelle Obama, no, she'd be a great president. And people aren't even realizing what they're doing. They're planting all these little seeds. How? Because unfortunately, a lot of people aren't actually seeing what's going on. You, as a journalist, understanding things, how would you kind of let people kind of to decipher who they can trust?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge challenge, right? So you cannot. I think it's not wise to answer by the same token and with the same means. So censorship of stuff we think of being evil is not the way. I mean, Matt Arrett has been mentioned by Grace earlier at the beginning of this talk, and I must say that Matt Arrett is a great teacher, has been a great teacher of me, and continues to be one, because he is opening my eyes. Again, understand, I've got a PhD in history, but my PhD is worth nothing because it has been granted to me by an institution of the establishment. Okay, so what they are teaching as history is not the history as it should be taught. I have learned this from Matthew Arrett and from his reference to, his latest book, Science Unshackled. I can only recommend to everyone, and Grace, you've been doing a show about it, or as I know, and I can recommend everyone to revisit this show. So in this, he lays out how there has been a tradition of two kinds of history and two kinds of sciences being in existence next to each other. And of course, one is the true science, and one is something which has been created artificially to suppress the truth and to suppress the true science. And it comes down to basically Platonic philosophy, right? The Platonic school of dialogue and dialectic. In this way, rigorous scientific testing, going not only for knowledge from an uninformed state, not only for knowledge, but also going for prudence, for reason, right? This is something which has been taken away, and it applies also to history, because you have to also go about it in the same manner to to look for the traditions of, for example, cults, right? So oligarchies, going back to Babylon, the Persians, then Roman Empire, Venice. This has all been oligarchies of a small group of people with vested interests who want to keep the masses dumb and ignorant. And what they teach to them is just shallow image of the truth, and it stops at being reasonable. It stops at being creative, and it creates fake science about Malthusian overpopulation and climate change and stuff like that, which is got nothing to do with what is going on, because temperatures have been changing since the world began, and it's got nothing to do with CO2. So therefore, creating this ideology is something which we must get out of. And again, Matthew Ehret and Cynthia Chung, his wife, have just been putting together this great show about the escape from Calypso Island and how this cultish death cult belief have contributed to the public being taught a very, very wrong way of looking at the world, and of forgetting their creative powers to go about and solve problems in a creative and truthful way, with a focus on truth and beauty and God's wisdom, right? Sorry. I'm sorry. So therefore, yes, we have to go about it the hard way, which is re-educating people about those foundations of what truth is, what science is, and then let them make up their own mind. We have to continue to speak out against injustice and about fake science and the perversion of science and truth. But we also have to stick to our values and our the sacred principle of creation and man being created in God's image, right? And not being a burden on the planet or so. This is Malthusian ideology, which has been created to sustain the British empirical model of the British East India Company and British Africa Company and British American Company, and all this, instruments of suppressing progress all over the world, keeping people dependent and consumerist and dumb.
And like, just finally, before I pass you over to your fellow German there, like with what Vera was saying, that this is going to happen again. Like, a lot of people think not in a million years, but if you look, I reported on one of the previous shows, but they were basically doing conscription for the Ukrainians that had actually moved to Ireland, and like I know that in Poland as well, they were kind of pushing them back. But I heard today that the UK, I don't know, has it been passed or they're pushing it for conscription in the UK. And when you look at that, it's like, for that to happen, they need wars, and they want wars, and there will be wars. And it's like, it's all planned, but people don't really know and think this can happen. But the reality is, it's written, it's there. We can see it happening.
Right. I think so. My initial reaction to that would be, okay, let's be very cautious about what we manifest and what we already invite into reality as possible. Right. That they want it, I subscribe to it. I mean, I come from a town, the city of Osnabrück, which is one of the two cities in which the Peace of Westphalia was negotiated, right? The Peace of Westphalia was the settlement of the 30 Years' War in Europe, which brought destruction and death to large parts of Central Europe, Germany in particular. So here was this peace was negotiated, and it was and Matt has also talked about it. It was an instrument of progress, of coming to terms with the concept of a sovereign nation which no one else has the right to interfere, right? For example, and with the concept of human dignity also. And anyway, so what I'm saying is the former mayor of this town of Osnabrück, the city of Osnabrück, who had been host to so many events highlighting the progress concept of the Peace of Westphalia, right? Osnabrück is called the city of peace in German, die Friedensstadt. He is now the German Minister of War, because it's not the Ministry of Defense anymore. He is advocating for people to brace for war. We have to be prepared for war. This is exactly what they're saying. And this is what we have to stand up against and say, no, we don't buy into this. We don't do this. We resist. We don't take part. Right? So this man, he's forgetting all he said during his time in office, and it has nothing to do with what is going on the world stage, because as we know, you don't make peace by going to war. It's a perverted concept of getting to a peace by waging war. You have to sit down, negotiate, and you have to try to understand your opponent and their interests, and you have to find reasonable solutions which serve humanity instead of destruction and death for innocent civilians and for the truth.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Uwe. Pass you over to Hartmut.
Hello, Uwe. My pleasure talking to you. My name is Hartmut from Bavaria. I'm very happy to talk to you.
Hi.
And it's a very tough subject because, for example, also in Germany we live in Germany in very exciting times. For example, at the weekend, the monumental of the victims for the war in Dresden was destroyed. Yeah. And I really remember the quote of George Orwell: "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." And we are living now in a situation where people, the situation is no one is allowed to talk about the history, because then we could repeat it, we could remember it. Yeah, and by remembering it, we could try to have freedom. The pandemic was more or less the first level of global torture, in my opinion, which can be very good, which is described in the Amnesty International report for torture from 1974. So that and the interesting thing is, by psychological torture or torture in general, is that after it is all about breaking the will. You have to break the will of the victim. The torture task is to break the will of the victim so that the victim will do everything what he wants to do. And at the same time, when in the moment when the will is broken, the victim will admire the torturer, and will become a torturer by himself. And he is losing completely, let's say, his own discernment. And this is what we are facing in this world. For example, we had this pandemic, and then we got bombarded with completely stupid information, and by the bombardment of our brain with completely stupid information, the discernment will decrease as well.
Yeah.
So the point is, do you still have hope that the people who are so brainwashed will have the chance to see the truth? Because we must understand the most people, or let's say it this way, many people choose to live in security and are willing to sacrifice freedom for this.
Yeah.
What is your opinion about that?
Well, I'm a committed and decidedly optimistic person, so therefore there is hope. This is the message of almost any religion which is in any way human and has the benefit of the people at heart. So therefore, I'm a Christian, and this is what I believe, definitely, that there is hope, even though that the circumstances may look dire. And you're right, inflicting trauma on the psyche of people is and has been a way of manipulating behavior on an individual basis, but also on a collective basis. And in one of the pieces which I wrote on my blog is the Tavistock connection, Hitler-Tavistock connection. I can also support the evidence that there has been a connection between the London Tavistock's School of Psychology, of Psychological Warfare, with the young Adolf Hitler before he became a leading figure in German politics even. So he was around Tavistock. He was where the Russell family of Lord Bertrand Russell and other family members have their dominion and their properties, and it is no coincidence that Tavistock is at the Tavistock Square, which is also a piece of property that belonged to the Russell family before it was turned into a city quarter, right? So therefore there is this distinct connection that people have been manipulated and used as tools for the oligarchy. How to get out of this is with the principle of mutual respect and love and hope and peace, right? So this is something which we have to. Mahatma Gandhi, he inflicted the second big defeat to the British oligarchy by leading the push for independence of India from Great Britain. And the first was, of course, the American Revolution under George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and others who have been committed to the principle of reason. Now, Gandhi did not go to war. He chose to remain pacifist, and he was very successful in that. I do think that it is something which we need to really take into account and think about, that we cannot, or maybe we should not, at least resort to violence. But we should have hope, and we should stick to what we perceive as truth, and what we perceive as truth will result in a creative, reasonable process of rigorous testing of hypotheses, and that's Plato.
I understand. One question: can we do 15 minutes longer, because this is a very interesting topic for me, if you have time?
Sure.
Brilliant. Because can you explain something about the school? Because this is so interesting that there are schools in order to serve the oligarchs. I'm talking about this because by accident I found a profile on Instagram, and this lady is talking about her abuse, like Paris Hilton in a treatment facility for teens in the United States of America. And the interesting thing is, they rob the dignity of the children directly from the first day by putting them naked in the glass box for 3 days, for example. And the interesting thing is, these treatments are mostly run by military. There are 6,000 schools in the US, they have 200,000 teens annually who go through this hell, and it's funded by $23 billion of the government. And one treatment costs $200,000 for 6 months. And this, when you mentioned the school, I immediately try to figure dots, or try to find out dots to these kind of schools in the United States of America, because these are the schools for the most wealthy children, not for, let's say, for the usual people. The most wealthy children, like Paris Hilton, went through these schools, and in my opinion, as far as I understood it, it turns empath in narcissists. So please go ahead with the school and maybe about your knowledge about the school, because it will explain a lot.
Well, so I'm not familiar with the example you cited, but what I can say is that there is ample evidence been published already about the Tavistock Institute and this whole school of psychological manipulation, psychological warfare, and dominance. I mean, it's not a coincidence, I think, that almost all intelligence services bring their personnel for training to Tavistock, okay, to be trained in such practices, whatever they are. I haven't done a deep dive into the ways that this has been done, because it is abhorrent to me. But there are many people who are far more versed on explaining what is exactly going on about it. All I can say is that this is going on. It has been set up right from the beginning to serve the interests of an oligarchy. And this is something which we can also see throughout history, where those cultish or perverse beliefs have been used to mess with a sane and healthy development of society by way of corrupting individuals with satanic, diabolical practices, with humiliation. And yes, you're right. It is common knowledge that those who have been subject to this kind of torture and mishandling are very, very easily fall very easily into the same modus operandi when they get to a position of having power over others. So therefore, this kind of perversion breeds more perversion, and we have to find ways to break through this vicious cycle. And again, I think a spiritual, humanistic, so you don't have to, I mean, people who are not inclined spiritually sometimes want to take great pains to watch it just with pure reason. But even if you do this, if you look at Plato, you can see that there is a way to come to the truth and to discover the concept of what it is that really is creative, productive, and reasonable in terms of bringing forth progress in life for humanity. And this is exactly what we should aim for. We should actively resist getting drawn into this kind of destructive modus, which is also a call to really hold us to principles of and to higher standards ourselves, and to make an extra effort, which we can only do if we get out of this focus on what is going on in the world in a negative way, and we focus on the beauty and the concept of freedom, for example, which is necessary. I mean, Schiller, again, I'm quoting from Matt and Cynthia's work. Schiller is the one, Friedrich Schiller, a German, so you and I should know best, but I had to admit that I was very poor in my knowledge of Schiller, but I have revisited his essays on human education by way of focusing on the concept of beauty, truth, and divinity. And he said it is through beauty that we get to freedom, whatever we consider freedom to be, but it is through beauty. So therefore, we have to also set aside moments in our schedule to disengage from the negativity and to realign with the concept of truth and beauty and divinity, of which we are not only a part, but we are called upon and created in God's image to contribute to this ongoing work. And this is something which I think is sometimes hard to do, because when we are in fear of what's going on, of what could go even worse, therefore we focus all the more on the negative stuff, but we can only do this for so long. So therefore we have to disengage from this in a regular fashion and in a controlled and disciplined fashion, to also re-educate ourselves, to reconnect with the beauty and with the power of the creativity of life and what is good and true.
I like to quote my brother. He is a passionate motorbike driver, and he said, if you're on a curve with your motorbike and you see a stone, you have to see the line beside the stone. So you see the stone and you see the line beside the stone. For this reason, it's, in my opinion, quite important to see the stone as well, but not to focus on the stone, because if you focus on the stone, then you have an accident.
Excellent. Right? Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and no, this is very interesting. And no, thank you so much. It was I could dive very deep in this subject with the schools and with the psychological, because this kind of schools, what you say, or let's say it this way, this kind of schools also in the United States, which are 6,000 already right now, they have the people behind them who run them, or let's say the knowledge of the school is very important for knowing how to control people. And I see how this control is done, let's say, in marketing strategies without pain in the society, by movies, by education systems, by changing the education system, etc. So they bring this kind of robbing the dignity, torturing and breaking the will. They make it public right now. And this is something what we have to, in my opinion, we have to see it. So that, and we have to talk about this, so that that a false freedom can be very destructive. Yeah. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you. I pass it to Grace.
Thank you, everyone. And Uwe, do you want to have your last words of wisdom and invitation for our audience where to follow you and Eva, Vera Sharav, and whatever else? And before that, let me just say that follow Roy also at the Awakening podcast. And Harmot is going to resuscitate her podcast, Go Your Own Path. He's been busy. And of course, follow me at Quantum Nurse Freedom International Podcast. We all have our presence when you search our name. But most of all, please support. And we have fantastic people, individual men and women like Dr. Uwe Alschner, whom you could find subscribe in his Substack and also in his YouTube and many more. So Uwe, please.
Yeah, so thank you again, Grace, for the opportunity to address your audience and to answer your questions. It is very important to have this kind of dedicated discussions with a focus on the beauty and truth which we are called upon to foster and to promote. The work which I would really like everyone to check out is that of Vera Sharav. She is the founder and president of the Alliance for Human Research Protection, ahrp.org, and the documentary which Vera has produced, and I have been assisting her in this, you can find on neveragainisnowglobal.com. My own work in English language, so I have a blog in German, which is not relevant to this audience of English language, but my English language writings you can find on neveragainisnowglobal.substack.com. And in it, I will try to make connections, to understand the past, to also make informed decisions about what is going on and how we should react to it in the present in order to make a contribution to a fruitful, creative, and constructive life in a spirit of mutual human dignity. And this is what I think is also coming from you, Grace, and so therefore thank you for inviting me onto your show.
You're most welcome, Uwe, and you know that this is a wonderful beginning, and I can only assure you that I'm going to reach out to you again in the future. Okay, so, and whenever you're free and you have time, we'll be with you again. Thank you. And for those of you there following us, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and do your part in every little way. Because that little way, just like all the other people who passed on already, with one person could always make a big difference. And yes, truth is beauty, freedom is beauty. So don't get distracted with all the things that we are fearful of, or else we will just succumb to everything bad. Okay, so source bless, God bless to everyone. Take care. Hug you from a distance. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends. And you'll find all my shows with the QR code or bio.link/podcaster, as well as my podcast coaching. And I'd like to thank my sponsor, DanielPacker.com, helping people with anxiety, stress, and addictions. He's got a 90% success rate, and you only pay if you're successful. Also, if you'd like to go on a podcasting tour, I can help you do that. And if you're interested in sponsorship, you can contact me on my bio.link/podcaster. Until next week, take care.